everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful evening. As always, it is a pleasure to be here with you today, bringing you some amazing conversations. And definitely today, we have an amazing guest that I'm looking forward to speaking with today so they can share all about their creative process, their creative journey, and just getting to learn a little bit more about what they do, as they are huge advocates of amplifying creativity. So I'm really, really excited to speak to Tim Needles this evening. So, again, before we dive in, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's watching, who's joining us live. I already see our great friend Tanya here who is posting, and I know that she was very excited about today's show. So, Tanya, thank you so much for joining us. And for everybody else, thank you as always for making my EdTech life what it is today. So I am excited and I'm ready to dive in. Tim, how are you feeling this evening?
I'm feeling good. It's nice. We're just starting school, so I'm kind of getting in the swing of it. And it's always nice to know that Tanya's out there too. So that's awesome.
Most definitely. I tell you, this weekend, Tanya and I, we did an ACE Institute with Misty and Jeff, and we brought on Celeste, and of course with Claudio, and it was just amazing. And I don't know how she does it. She's just a ball of energy, and so for her to be here after these 3 weeks of school, and of course with the kiddos and everything, but I am definitely thankful that Tanya's here. So Tim, again, let's go ahead and dive right in. And as you know, and like I always tell every single guest that comes on the show, I have the opportunity to interview some of my favorite people that I follow on social media. And honestly, I tell them that I really liken them to kind of superhero status, in the sense that, what you do really has had an impact on me in some way, shape, or form as far as the creative process. So I am also excited that I know that every superhero has an origin story. So, Tim, I would love to ask you just for a little bit about your origin story. And I always like to ask, too, within your origin story, was education something that you knew you wanted to pursue? Or was that something that was maybe a little secondary and came in a little bit later? So I'd love to hear that.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been teaching for 25 years on Long Island, New York, and I kind of always knew I wanted to be a teacher. And I'm an artist and a teacher, so teaching art and being able to kind of share creativity, and it's a different approach when you are a practicing artist. You get to kind of share and collaborate with students in a different way. So I knew early on that I wanted to be a teacher, partially because I had great teachers growing up, and it makes a big difference to you. Um, and it's great because I celebrate great teachers all the time as a ed tech coach now in schools. I also work in the college. So I work at Five Towns and I teach film and emerging media on the college level, which is a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to more. So it's been great, sharing some of what I do, especially, I wrote the book Steam Power, and that kind of changed my life as an educator because it just connected me with so many more people that do STEAM and creative work. So that was a real change a few years ago, back in 2020. The book came out right as the pandemic hit. So bad timing there, but it was really nice to be able to connect online with so many people.
And that's always great. I love what you said. And, the fact that you already knew that this is what you wanted to do. And as an artist, I often feel that, and I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as an artist, I feel that it's almost something natural to want to teach somebody, whatever art or modality that you are great at, or multiple modalities of art. And so it just seems like a natural fit. And just the fact, too, that you get to have fun creating with your students, and the work that you get to do with teachers, that's definitely very exciting. And I'm a huge, huge fan of your work, because I myself too am a big fan of amplifying creativity in the classrooms. And I do see the importance of giving students that time to really have some discourse, some discussion, and create around those ideas while they're learning. So awesome stuff. Well, Tim, I wanted to ask you, being in education for as long as you have, in 25 years, and also being an author and being very well connected, as I mentioned, on social media, I am a huge fan and a follower of your work. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, from your perspective, how do you see the intersection of art and creativity and technology shaping kind of the future of education through your own eyes?
I think it's really exciting, to be honest. It's interesting because, it's such a game changer. I think, the last couple of years, you see kind of, these big sort of shifts in education. And I think education really needed that. And it still does. So I'm glad to see that the direction that's sort of happening now. But I'm really excited about it. I mean, like, if you look in the art world, it's making an impact. And certainly in education, I think it's making an impact too. Education is always a little slow to change. It's, slow crawling because it's a very traditional system and it's hard, the way that schools are set up in different states. It's, one school could be totally different than another one 5 miles down the road sometimes. But I think it's exciting. It allows for a lot of collaboration. It allows for really extending beyond just the classroom to connect with classrooms around the world. That's amazing. And I think it allows for more creativity too.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I did want to dive in a little bit more that you mentioned in your answer is I love the fact that you said it allows the students to collaborate and not necessarily just within your own four walls of the brick and mortar school that you're in, but again, really extending far beyond the walls of your classroom, because I'm pretty sure that, being connected to and connecting with other educators around the world or globally, that is something that now we never really thought of until after we really got all those devices and being one to one. And not to say that there weren't teachers that were using that yet, but now it just seems like, hey, the possibilities are here, and we can definitely bring in some wonderful artists also from different areas to learn from and you're really getting like that kind of a one-on-one private lesson with somebody that is great and sharing their stories too as well. So I really like that you mentioned that. So also the fact that you mentioned that in education sometimes can be a little slow moving. And yeah, actually we had a meeting earlier today and we're trying to change some things, and it's very difficult sometimes because again we have people that we're used to doing things a certain way, and it's all about improvising, adapting, and overcoming. But very true. Um, in that sense, I want to ask you, what do you think right now, as far as the way that you implement technology in your classrooms? What has been some of the maybe the exciting points for students that are using, of course, maybe going from Canvas and now creating in the digital space and being able to work with both of those things? What are the students seeing, and what do they get most excited about?
Well, it's super interesting. I think the technology really allows for students to do some really high level work that they might not be able to do traditionally just because they don't have the skill set yet. Being a master painter or, a craftsman takes years of practice. And technology is a way that actually just cuts down on some of that time. So, like, especially with AI, you see some of the tools that are infused with AI just really offer students a way to kind of get their message out there, because it's frustrating as a student when you have a great idea and you just don't have the skills to do it. But technology offers them a little bit of a shortcut to those skills. And I know that lots of teachers are uncomfortable with that because it's like, well, I had to learn this over 10 years in school, but like, now students could do it in 5 minutes. But that's also just progress for you. You know what I mean? You used to have to take a long time to send a message, and now it's immediate. So, that's the way technology changes the world. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. I've seen students be able to do work that is really professional level, and that's you know uh, kind of amazing. Like, it's really impressive because some students just have a vision. So now with technology, they're able to really accomplish that, and really see it through to a really professional standard, which is kind of amazing. It's exciting.
It really is. And, a lot of things that you hit on there, very interesting talking about generative AI. So I want to ask you, and again, one of the things that I do hear is that you're very excited about that because a lot of students can really get those ideas, not only like before that they might have trouble plastering that on canvas, but they can visualize it and then really explain it and describe it in such a way that that art piece came to life. So I want to ask you, and your perspective as far as being an artist as well, and we know the years of practice that go into doing that. What were your first impressions with generative AI, and what are your thoughts about it in the classroom and maybe in the artist space? Do you find that there is a difference between both spaces and their thought if they're thinking of generative AI?
I think there's a difference in the way that, different types of personalities think of it really. So that happens in both spaces. So there's some artists that already have done really interesting work with AI. There's a piece at the MoMA that had AI. They took all of the artwork in the entire museum and they created an AI piece that connects them. So a really powerful piece. It allows you to understand the connections between art that you might never have seen. I mean, that's one of the amazing things with AI. If you feed tons of data, it's able to pull out connections that you would never have the time to understand. And I think in the classroom, it's really similar. So, I think it allows for some amazing work. I mean, I remember teaching my film class and seeing some of the stuff that, Adobe Firefly was doing and some of the things that are coming out in the future. And it's just like, I was blown away. And, talking to the students, they're kind of like, like they're used to like amazing technology at a regular level. I'm like, astounded. And like, they've gotten so much new technology in their lifetime that it's just, par for the course. So, I'm maybe more excited than some of the students are. Like, they're used to using some of these new tools. And there's teachers and there's artists that are really, don't like it. I talk to a lot of, English teachers that want to go back to pen and pencil, and they're afraid of the technology. And that happened, with the cell phone, and that happened with the camera. There's a history of that sort of, whenever you have a new big change, there's always a negative reaction. But ultimately, the technology is here and it's going to be part of our world. So I think it's really our responsibility as educators to bring it to the students and show them how to use it in a responsible and productive, creative way.
Absolutely. And we've got a comment here from Tanya who's joining us. She says, empowering our students with cutting edge technology platforms has the potential to supercharge their learning and unleash their creative expression in truly exhilarating ways. I love it. And then face red, heart shape. Oh, StreamYard, you're going to have to do better at making sure that those emojis pop up. But yes, I agree. And I want to just share a little anecdote with you. At the beginning of the year, actually, when we came back for professional development, for the first time, I got to meet with fine arts teachers, which included band, which included choir, art as well. The only one that I forgot was the dance teacher that was there, because when they said fine arts, I was like, ugh, I forgot. But I had a Padlet ready with a bunch of links and some of them to some of the AI platforms. Like, for example, I was sharing Adobe Express. And of course, I did have a little bit of pushback from one particular teacher, just really kind of just feeling like, hey, like that's too much of a finished product. Like, that's, what am I going to do? How am I going to assign it? And really, I was just talking to them and just said, well, look, for myself, never being an artist and always wanting to create, maybe I never got enough practice, or maybe I didn't have, a very great teacher that really cared. But now the fact that I can take my words and my descriptions and put them into a platform like Adobe Express and get to see an iteration of what is in my mind and bringing it to life. To me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a thrill. And so I was kind of talking to them and saying, maybe this could be a way of seeing what their finished product could be, but then they can still lay it down on the canvas for you. Or if they're doing a different kind of modality, but at least it kind of gets that creative juice flowing. And that's when he was kind of like, oh, okay, like, kind of seeing things and seeing the potential there. The other one that was great was with the band directors. There was the one with Google, the AI experiment where you actually get to conduct. And so
Yeah.
they loved that one. So I told them a great use case for this is if you ever have a kid that says that what you do, standing up there waving your little baton, is too easy, just go ahead and set them up with this, and they'll see that it's not as easy as it is to carry those melodies. So Definitely, yes. I see that there is so much great things that can happen. And again, for the students, like you mentioned, with them growing up with so much tech, it just seems like, that's just no biggie. Like I've seen something like that before, something similar. But for us, we're like, this is amazing. So for sure. So I want to ask you then, within your scope of work too, because I know that you do also train teachers. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
Okay, so I want to ask you too, as far as technology and with art and creativity, what are some ways that maybe you try and help share those creative components with them, so that they may sprinkle onto what they're already doing great in the classroom?
So like I recently, like 2 years ago, this is my third year of being a technology integration specialist, which is just another name for an ed tech coach. And as an art teacher, like I look at it as a secret opportunity to also share creativity as well as creativity. And so like the creativity and the technology together is really powerful. And I think it's ironic, but one of the things that I have found about creativity and trying to get students to be creative is that it's sort of a little bit backwards thinking, but if you offer limitations, it's actually easier for students to be creative. So, sometimes if you say like, be creative, I'll give you all the materials, like people just don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. Everyone just flounders, but if you put them in a box and you say like, all right, well, I want you to create a drawing, but you have to use a computer and you can't use your hands. You know what I mean? Like that's a lot of limitations. Like now you really need to think creatively. So I have students like create self-portraits without showing their face. I have students like create sculptures without using any of the traditional materials. And I offer these things to teachers of all different areas as well. So like when I come into a science classroom, I'm just someone who's like used to looking for the opportunities for creativity. And as a person that uses a lot of technology, tech fails a lot, and you get used to that, and you're used to pivoting. And improv was one of the best tools I ever had as a teacher. So you get offered opportunities all the time. I think the pandemic, in a lot of senses, was a big opportunity to learn how to connect with kids, through a digital medium.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's funny because it's like you feel like a failure at first. It's like the traditional ways of teaching just don't work, and you need to kind of throw it out and find ways to connect. And there's a benefit to that because we all became, anyone who made it through became a better teacher. That's one of the silver linings.
Absolutely. You hit on a lot of great things. And I'm sure that Tanya's listening here. And like you mentioned, tech happens. That's what I always tell my teachers, when it doesn't go right. And the ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome is definitely something that is very helpful for any teacher. So when you mentioned improv, I always feel that maybe pre-service teacher programs should offer, number one, a marketing class, I always say, to learn how to sell, and sell to students, but also even an improv class, or theater class, to be able to improv, because that's really what we do often, is really a lot of improvisation when things like that happen. But um
100%.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So Tanya is here sharing, Tim is amazing. That's right.
thank you.
So this weekend, actually, when we were doing the institute, for about that first session that we do, when we're setting everything up and we're doing their graphic and so on, like the Wi-Fi went down, and it was like, okay, so now we're gonna go to plan B, and we're just there talking and seeing, ways that we can implement this graphic other than just like an about me graphic. So I was telling them like, hey, some teachers use this type of graphic for their social studies, where instead they replace the person with a historical figure, and then they put up points and things of that sort. So again, just having to improvise and sharing the way that you're using these things, and being at the ready. And so that's one thing that I love. And sometimes stepping out of the box feels a little bit uncomfortable, and for a lot of teachers it really is. But once they start seeing the kind of magic that can happen when you allow students to really amplify their creativity and show their learning in a way that is very natural to them, in the sense of them being able to navigate online, or navigate platforms with ease, and have these great spatial reasoning what is it, skills, because they're always playing Minecraft. I had a Eric Tao yesterday, and he has this platform where they're really immersed in a 3D space. And he's like, man, kids navigate this easy because they're going through it, they use it. So I think a lot of times maybe just a little bit, like you mentioned, that reluctance from teachers because it's something new. And also because they may feel a little vulnerable that they may not know it 100%. So how do you maybe encourage, as you're coaching, you do have those teachers that, there's some that you kind of have to hold their hand a little bit more, but how do you start building them up so they have that nice comfort level when using the tech?
I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think actually sharing your vulnerability is really necessary to be a good teacher. And certainly that's something that I share with the teachers that I work with. So, it's like, I'm seen as this person who understands technology, but there's, like maybe every day there, I throw myself into something I have no idea what I'm doing. So, I think it's important to stay a little bit uncomfortable and moving forward. I never wanted to just kind of rest on my laurels as a teacher. I think that's, where the interesting stuff happens, where the really good learning happens, is where you're experimenting and you're keeping it alive. And when you have those moments that happen in the classroom, when you highlight the creative choices that were made, and the sometimes unexpected things that happen, I think that's really important. So with teachers, I always share that, like, I started just really collaborating with my students and as a teammate. It's like I have no idea how to code, but I saw a 7-year-old do it on a TED talk, and like if he could do it, me and 24 students could figure it out. So, we did. And, by the end of the class, we got coding down. And then the next year, I tried a little bit more advanced version of it. And, we built an app. So I think, putting yourself out there and modeling how to deal with failure is really important. So, I do it with teachers, and I do it with students, and I do it with admins. I think that's, it's important to kind of keep that perspective of what it's like to be a learner, because it's frustrating sometimes, and like you're facing failure, but like if you persist and you reflect on like what's happening wrong, that's just learning. So it's really important to kind of just keep that perspective. The mindset is really essential. And I've been teaching for 25 years in the same district, so I look closely at teachers towards the end of their careers, and it's like you have all of this skill you've built up of being able to work with students, and it's important to stay fresh and be authentic. I mean, like, what are the students interested? So, whatever their interests are, I try to cater towards them. And it's the same thing with teachers. Like I ask, like, well, what is a project you really love to do? I'll help you find the technology to do that. And I'll co-teach with you. Like, like if you're not comfortable, like I'll come in and I'll work with you, and I'll teach you and the students at the same time. And like, they'll be a really big aid for you. You know what I mean? So like students, there's always students that are like, really quick with certain kinds of different technology. And it's a huge aid when I come in and work with both the teacher and the students. I think it's always a good experience.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, one of the things that I want to highlight is that it's okay to not know everything, and it's okay to feel a little vulnerable. But I also love the fact that you mentioned that this can turn in, I mean, it all depends on your mindset, but like you mentioned, this could turn like into a really great collaborative learning session. Like you mentioned, you saw something that was amazing to you, and you said, you know what, I may not know everything, but I want to try it out with my students. And you all learn together. And I am of that same schooling where I would go to TCEA, or I would go to a conference, and I would pick the little that I knew and said, okay, guys, check this out. We're going to try something. I don't know everything, but we're going to learn together. And I love the fact that, with my first class, we did it. We hit some bumps. We overcame those. I learned some things from there. And then by my second class, I looked a little bit more like the expert, like I knew what I was doing. So by the last class of the day that I had, man, I looked like an expert. But what I love about it, and I always tell my students, I said, I just learned this today from everybody else. So believe it or not, in one way, shape, or form, we all learned together from each other. I just simply passed on that learning from the first class into the second, and the second into the third. And really, the students seeing that mentality, and even learning how to model failure in front of them and how to improvise, is something that's very important. And I think we miss out on a lot of great opportunities. And I understand that curriculums, you have to be at a certain point at a given time, and you have to complete those things. But oftentimes, I think that the return on instruction, when you kind of slow it down and you really take in those teachable moments can really pay off in the end, when the students start building that community and really start digging in deeper and are buying in. So, yeah, I absolutely love that, and the fact that you walk in with with your teachers and your willingness to coach, and that is also very important as well. We've got some wonderful teachers that just need just sometimes just that little safety net for a little bit, and then man, they just roll with it and they get it down. So absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing those experiences, Tim. Now, going along, with that, and speaking or getting back a little bit more into the art piece, because I really want to dive into your mind and the creativity, because I know we'll talk about your book too as well. But getting back into the art, I want to ask you, Tim, when did you know or that this is what you wanted to pursue as far as becoming an artist? Was it something from a very young age that just inspired you and you said, yes, this is it? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it was super early. I think, it was actually like first grade where there was an art project we did in class where we had to create Abe Lincoln's hat. So, I worked with a teacher, and it was an interesting problem because it's like we only had, paper and traditional materials. So I had to sort of think outside the box. And, I found that I had a knack for it, but also that I had an ability to communicate through, that creative media. So, in the ensuing years, like I had lots of opportunities to, one of my favorite things is when you have an English teacher who's you were reading a book or something like that, and they would offer an alternate version of the assignment where you could do something creative, and like that was always like my moment to shine, and it was fantastic to sort of interpret the work in a creative way using pastels and pencils and paint and construction and any of those type of tools. And technology was sort of just coming along when I was in school. So, I remember I tell students that like, I remember the first screensaver, the whole class just sat around the computer and just watched like the balloons move across and we were all like in wonder about how cool this was. And, it just became something that's on the back of computers you don't even think about. And then it just sort of disappeared. So, yeah, I mean, I sort of knew early that this was a way for me to communicate. I'm not going to ever like raise my hand in class and talk, but like if you give me a way to be creative and share an answer or to share my feelings, I'll always do that.
That is great. Tim, I'm gonna let you know something. Back a couple weeks back, I had yes, oh my gosh, is it Trisha Fiegelstead on the
Oh yeah,
show?
yeah.
And she's also an artist. She's also an artist. And it's very interesting, Tim, that her story in a similar way to yours, and you just mentioned, she said, I'm never going to raise my hand. I was always the quiet person, just drawing, and I was doing the art. And that's the way that I shared my learning. So then I'm wondering, I was like, if that's either a coincidence or if it's something that's very usual between artists or people that have that, I guess, that skill or that gift to be able to create. And so that's something that I just found very interesting. But one thing too that I love that you said is learning how to uh, come up with a product with maybe not the best materials or maybe even not all the materials. And so I can see how that ties into, of course, your current role, the work that you do, and thinking outside the box and being creative. So then once you got into teaching and of course you were working as an art teacher, talk to us a little bit about your book and how that came about. And I can imagine that it was probably something that you went and saw at a conference and you said, oh, I want to try including maybe STEM and or STEAM into my classes. Tell us a little bit about that and how your book came to fruition.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really a funny story. I happen to be at ISTE, because I would go every year, and a friend of mine had written a book, and she said, "Do you want me to introduce you to, my editor?" And yeah, I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." Like and then I realized, like, oh, am I supposed to pitch a book or something? Or just say hello? It's like, let me introduce you to your dad. I didn't think anything of it at first, and then I'm like, well, I better kind of have an idea in my back pocket just in case this is what I'm supposed to do. So I really just pitched, a collection of my favorite projects with different technology. And then, I was doing STEAM well before the acronym was popular, just because, I think one of the things that's important as a teacher is just like staying curious and allowing that curiosity to flourish in the classroom. So like, promoting it among students, like, what do you just interested about? What are you curious about? And like, let's find an answer. So like, those are authentic moments, and that's always the kind of way that I worked as an artist and a teacher. So I just put together a collection of, 18 of my favorite projects, and kind of framed it with like, the mindset and things that you would need to really amplify this. And then if you're bringing it to the next level, how to collaborate and bring it to, and elevate it and scale it up with some of the projects. So, it was an actually simple process. And it's never been that simple again. So like, in ensuing projects, it's like, I just really lucked out. But sometimes like fate just, plays a hand. And it was, it came out in the pandemic, like March 2020. So the schools closed. I had to cancel my book tour, and like, I was about to go on a bunch of conferences. But the benefit was that I had talked a lot about online learning and ways to collaborate online. So I also, one of the things with technology is I included social emotional learning, because I feel like technology is just ever changing. So like, you really need to take care of yourself and kind of frame what is realistic as a teacher that's using technology. You're not going to master everything. What are your strengths? What would you like to get better at? So because I included so many of those things, they happen to play well into some of the needs of teachers. So it helped me in that way. And it's been great because on my website, I started adding additional lessons and projects and things like that. And it's fantastic to see people interpret it. So like sometimes I tried to make everything really elastic so that you could do it in, kindergarten or college. And really, it's idea based, and there's a bunch of different technologies, but like, you could do anything with cardboard. I mean, like it's one of the most creative mediums out there. So, you could, include lots of, technological elements if you want to, but, even just traditional cardboard, really creative tool. So it was
Excellent.
kind of fun to see so many teachers kind of use it, and, see how they use it in class. And it kind of just continues to grow, which is really fun.
And that's great to hear, Tim. Like you said, good or bad, the book when it came out, but the fact that it's making a positive impact, and the fact that in that book, like you mentioned, you were talking about online learning. And then, of course, with teachers just having to flip the switch and going from brick and mortar now virtual classrooms, it's like, oh my gosh, overwhelming. And just to have a resource like that handy with projects that include some of the tech and with simple basic things that could be laying around the house, or even improving, where maybe you may not have this particular material, but there's something, else different that is available. I think that that's something that's great. And sometimes we just find that maybe people don't think that technology and maybe kind of like the analog materials in that sense can still mix, and you can work wonders with it. But I've seen some amazing projects that are out there, with even scratch coding.
Mhm.
You're coding with straw bees, little things of those sorts that you can create at home with that are low tech, but that
Right.
still you're building those skills and those coding skills. And I think those even the skills that can get you future ready for a lot of our students from elementary all the way into high school, getting into higher ed, where you are preparing them and giving them that exposure and experience, or learning experience, I should say, to be able to create at a minimalist level, but come up with something and ideate an iteration. And again, some of those things that I honestly feel, just from my perspective, that we do lack a lot of in classrooms. But I mean, if we could just bring that back, and one of the favorite activities that kind of you mentioned earlier, which is one of my favorite activities that we do at the Institute, is when you have to rewrite the story in 6 words, like summarize the story in 6 words, and see the teachers get very creative when they're going through the iterations of the Three Little Pigs. And this weekend I said, you know what, we're going to change the story. We'll do Little Red Riding Hood. And just the things that I saw, in their 6 words and their graphics, I was so impressed with. So again, I think introducing those things to teachers and saying, when you think tech, it doesn't mean that you have to really dive in deep and you're just immersed in it, but it works well to create a graphic, get a point across. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just keep it simple, but sometimes simple can turn into just a wonderful output and a wonderful outcome of learning. So that's great. Awesome, awesome. Well, I love that. Let me see here. Tanya, let me see. It says here, Tanya says, we made a shark out of
Oh, there
cardboard.
you go.
Thanks
Yeah,
to
that's nice.
Tim. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it looks
So
awesome.
love it. All right. Well, Tim, let's go ahead and just talk just a little bit more as we're kind of getting ready to wrap up. And I just want to get your ideas as far as art and technology. How can schools, or in your opinion, or maybe through your expertise, that maybe there might be a school doing it well, or what are your ideas on how we can get art to be very accessible and inclusive for all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really big issue, actually, the inclusivity part. Because it's like, I worked in the New York City district, and it's like you see a big range between like students that really have a ton and then students that just don't have that much. And, that's one of the bigger issues in education, I think, is, the keeping things equitable. I mean, the good news is that, the technology has become more inexpensive. And even now with just a cell phone, you're able to do so much. You're able to do things like animate with audio or something like that on Adobe Express. And it's kind of amazing. So like you don't need mass, like it used to be really expensive, even like laser cutters and some of the advanced like VR or AR, that kind of stuff was always very expensive. And now it's come down in price a lot, which is helpful. But I think that's really an important issue. I was lucky enough to be chosen for the Connected Arts Network, which is the four different disciplines of the arts. Got a grant from the Department of Education to actually focus on ED&I and SEL. And it's really fun working with artists from around the country of different disciplines and seeing like how different people deal with equity, because there's schools that just don't have the resources. But one of the advantages here is that like, the computers do connect us. So like, if you don't have the resources, you could send me the files and I'll print them. And, I think there's a lot of local libraries have a lot of things. There's local maker spaces and things like that. And, luckily with just even a Chromebook these days, you're able to do quite a bit, which is nice. So I think that's going to be one of the bigger challenges coming up is how do we, as technology grows, how do we, make sure that it's equally distributed and that people have an opportunity to create like this. Because if you look at some of the well-known artists in the space, some of them did not, have the advantage of coming from schools that really offered these things. They found out about it afterwards. So, I hate to think that there's an amazing artist that's out in the classroom that just doesn't have the tools, or the teacher to inspire them. That's always the thing that worries me, I think.
Absolutely. That's great. And, again, oftentimes, and I'll be honest with you, even through my experience, is it seems like the arts kind of fall by the wayside. And it's always like, obviously, curriculum and instruction and so on. But then it's like sports, and of course, and it's great. But here in Texas, it's all about football. It's
Yeah.
all about football. And then all of a sudden it's like you mentioned, the need for the arts program or just even supplies. And you mentioned, being able to make sure that the students have the ability to create or have the tools. I think that's something that's very important, because again, there you may have the next big artist in your classroom, and you want to make sure that you have what you need and what is available. And more than anything, it's just being able to say like, yeah, I'm taking care of my program, making sure that everybody's good. And but I do agree, maybe we can do a lot better. And that's why, along with you, I'm a huge proponent of amplifying creativity. And again, thanks to Chromebooks too as well, and a lot of programs being web based. Oh man, that really helps out a lot. But not everybody has, like you mentioned, equal access, and that's something that we can definitely do better. Well, Tim, thank you so much. It has been an amazing conversation. And again, uh, I am kind of like fanboying right now because again, still, because again, just the way that you are and the fact that I also got to meet you in person, and you're such an amazing person, so humble, so willing to talk and share with everybody. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here and, having this conversation with me and sharing it with the world too as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Right back at you, because I've always enjoyed the podcast and I've seen lots of colleagues and friends on here. So it's really fun to actually be on myself.
Excellent. Oh, and here's Tanya. She says, "Me too, me too." All right. Well, before we wrap up, we're not done yet because I always love to end the show with the following three questions. And I did update those there on the calendar as well. But before we get into that, I definitely want to thank our sponsor for today's episode. So, a big shout out to Goose Chase for sponsoring this episode of My EdTech Life. So, guys, if you're interested in diving into the world of interactive experiences with Goose Chase, please make sure that you check them out at goosechase.com, goosechase.com, and you can use code MyEdTech10, MyEdTech10, and you can take 10% off any plan, whether it's a district plan, whether it's a personal plan, or whether it's a school plan. Go check them out. They've got some great activities, and they can definitely make your classroom a great learning experience with a lot of those interactions. So please make sure you check them out. So thank you again, Goose Chase. All right, Tim, here we go. The last three questions. So, as we know, kryptonite was the one thing that made Superman weak. So, I want to ask you, Tim, in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
For me, I think it would have to be negativity. We're faced with so many issues and dilemmas that as educators that like, a bad attitude is just one extra thing you have to kind of deal with and work around. So, I think having a creative mindset that's really looking at how do we solve the problems that we have, and how do we really focus on the students is so important. So negativity is one thing that could really drag you down. I've seen some of my colleagues just like burn out because of it. It's a shame.
Excellent. Yeah, actually, yes, you're absolutely right. And it's very interesting. We get into these spaces through our networks to find that additional support and so on. But again, many times there are a couple of actors that, really just kind of, make things a little bit difficult. But you're absolutely right. We definitely need a lot more positivity, and that the fact that we're here to help each other and build each other up, definitely, definitely very important. Tim, question number two. If you can have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
First of all, I'd be really excited to have that billboard. But I would have to say, like, when I created swag for my book, one of the things I created was just a statement that was just like has become like the way I close every session, which is be kind, be creative, and change the world.
Nice. Nice. So simple yet very effective, and it's so deep too. I absolutely love that. That would be definitely a great billboard, or could definitely be also a great shirt. I'm just throwing
Yeah,
it
there
out
you
there, so that'd be great. So when those come out, Tim, you let me know. I'm definitely gonna be handing over my credit card number, so that way I can go ahead and
go.
purchase for sure. All right, Tim. And the last question, Tim, is aside from art and anything work related, I want to ask, do you have a hobby or favorite activity that you wish you could turn into a full-time profession?
Yeah, and I would say I'm actively trying to do that too. One of my favorite things to do is travel. So, like, I love traveling. There's no better learning experience than traveling to different places and learning how different people think and live. So, like, my goal for when I retire is to just travel and teach and speak. I love traveling, and I want to go to all the continents. I've been to four, so I'm still working at getting around the world.
Excellent. Well, that is great, Tim. That is so good to hear. And again, just to hear just how great you are, how amazing, how helpful you are, and obviously that heart that you have. You definitely have a great heart for sharing with teachers and being able to help out. And the work that you're doing is something that is amazing and at another level. And I know that every single one of us here in the education space, in one way or another, definitely benefit from your passion for what you do. So continue on with that passion, continue sharing your heart with others. And again, I definitely hope that you do make it over to those other continents and you get to travel the world as you wish, my friend. So thank you again for being here and making my evening a very special one and filling my bucket with this amazing conversation circling or that encompasses, sorry, creativity. So thank you again, my friend. And for all our audience members, thank you, Tanya, also for joining us today. But for all our audience members, oh, she says here, big corazon. That's right.
Yeah.
Definitely has a big heart. All right, guys. But for all our audience members that are catching this on the replay or will be listening to it as well, thank you so much for making my ed tech life what it is today. We do what we do for you. So, again, we can bring you some amazing guests with amazing, deep conversations that can help inspire you, that can help fan that flame or light that spark again. And again, just help equip you with certain things that maybe even Tim shared today that you can sprinkle onto what you are already doing great. So please make sure that you also visit our website at myedtech.life, myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 230 episodes, guys. We're so excited
Impressive.
that we've made it this far, and you can check out those episodes with amazing educators, creators, entrepreneurs, founders, and so on. There's a little bit of everything for each and every single one of you to learn from. So thank you as always. And of course, if you'd like to contribute to our mission, stop by our store there on our website. We know winter conference season is coming up, so a nice little sweater will keep you warm, whether it's at a conference or just lounging around having your favorite cup of tea or your favorite cup of coffee. And as you know, all of that goes back into our show so we can continue to bring you some amazing conversations. So thank you as always from the bottom of my heart. And my friends, don't forget, until next time, stay techie.